welcome to the Artandhustle Gallery Conversations. Welcome here, Jose. So tell us a little bit about what you're doing now and where you're at with your gallery and everything.
Yeah, sure. Well, my name's Jose Gomez. I'm a photographic artist in Tampa, Florida, and I'm also the proprietor and one of the curators for House of Shadows Gallery and Creative Market.
That's amazing. Now, how long has it been open?
We've been open for about a year and a half. We've run art exhibitions in Tampa Bay for the last good 7, 8 years, but after the pandemic and the first month that they introduced the vaccines, we decided to open the place up because things weren't opening up quite fast enough. So we decided to open up the gallery. We had just shut off our marketing company's location and sent everybody to work from home. So it was a great time to do it.
Oh my God, that's amazing. Well, congratulations for opening it.
Yeah, thanks.
That's awesome. Now let's take it back to where you grew up and your nationality and how it started for you.
Yeah, so I was born in New York, Glen Cove, New York, and had half of my childhood in New York till about 11, 12 years old, and then my family moved over to Florida, and we grew up in Spring Hill, Florida, and then later on in Tampa. And I've been in Tampa since then. So that was 1988 is when we moved
Wow.
out.
So did you
So
go
pretty
to
Floridian.
did you go to Mulvey or which
I
school did you
did.
go to?
Yeah,
Mulvey.
I went to Mobley Elementary School for elementary, and I spent about I did half the school year in CI's junior high over there,
Oh, okay.
and then we moved right in the middle of the school year.
Ah, okay. Awesome. Awesome. Yeah, like Melissa Jones recommended you, and I was joking with her because like I lost a lot of my childhood memories. So like a lot of things will be like gaps. So like sometimes I'll have interviews with people
Hmm.
from childhood and they'll remind me like they're like, Linda, you were in my class or you were in this class, whatever. And I'm like, I'm so sorry, I forgot.
That's funny.
Yeah, but she said like, yeah, he used to do art and you should reach out to him. I'm like, yeah, I'd love to. I'd love to hear people's stories of their journey and then how you got to be successful and like followed your passion. Like, did you always know that you wanted to do art?
Well, art has been kind of something I've kind of fluctuated in and out of mediums. When I was young, I liked to draw, and I liked art in general, but I focused a lot of my attention to music. So for the first 35 years of my life, I was very heavily involved in music,
Mhm.
singing, and I know a bunch of instruments and playing those instruments. And throughout my school years, I had a few bands and played around, and so
Mhm.
I did that for a long time and left kind of the drawing and stuff to my childhood.
Yeah.
But later on in life, kind of rediscovering visual mediums in photography and started off in kind of the fashion direction, and
Mhm.
then ultimately ended up in more of kind of the visual arts and fine art category.
Yeah, yeah. That's amazing. Now, what college did you go to?
Well, actually, I did correspondence with the Stratton School of Business, but not a whole lot of college when it comes to art, and really just applied business practices to my own starting as an entrepreneur, starting businesses.
Yeah, yeah, that's amazing. Now, what led you fully back into art and being able to exhibit it and then eventually, start your own gallery? Like, how was that process?
Well, there was a bit of a process that kind of started pre-art, which is that in 2001, I quit my job to start a marketing. Well, at that time, I didn't know it was going to be a marketing company, but we started as a kind of as a custom development shop. One of the arts that I know is software building and software. I consider myself a software artist.
Hmm.
And so I created software for things like website management and e-commerce and a bunch of other things. Created a few companies along the way, sold a few of those companies off, and continued to grow
Hmm.
what became a kind of digital marketing web presence platform for nonprofits. And so we, continued to grow that. And in the middle of doing all of that and
Yeah.
seeing success, you start being able to fund things that you like.
Yeah,
Now
you
that
gotta fund
you,
your passions.
yeah, once you pay your bills, then you can look around and say, well, what do I actually want to do?
Yeah.
So I started at that time. My wife at the time was a model, and we were doing some fashion shows for nonprofit fashion shows, and we couldn't find photographers to work with. So I decided to buy a camera. At that point, I was already doing visual medium through graphic design,
Hmm.
and and I really liked it. So I started photographing fashion shows and started photographing for designers. And before I knew it, I was kind of involved in this whole fashion photography scene.
Yeah.
And that's where I kind of grew up in photography and visual arts.
Hmm. Hmm.
Ultimately, my business was doing a lot more successful than I had planned it to be. So I had to kind of choose between growing a photography business and growing my general business. And it was making a whole lot more money, so it was a pretty easy decision.
Yeah.
Put down my camera for a few years, and when I came back, I did it through fine art, not knowing. I did a shoot
Hmm.
for a friend who called me up. She's a fashion friend from Palm Beach, and she asked me if I would shoot her, and I told her I wasn't shooting. And she asked me why. I said, well, I just don't want any pressure to give anybody any pictures. I'm kind of done with the production world. And
Yeah.
she said, you know what? Shut up. Just shoot me and then send the pictures back. And I said, well, I'll tell you what, I'll shoot you if you let me do what I want to do with it. And she agreed. And
Yeah.
so we got to this really creative shoot. And I realized that what I didn't like about photography wasn't photography, it was clients. So,
And the
so I just,
rigidness of having to follow those rules of what they want.
yeah, in fashion, you have to kind of recreate, I
Yeah.
want it to look like this magazine or this other designer or this
Hmm. Hmm.
editorial that I saw. But
Yeah.
with fine art, I get to kind of experiment with my own creative processes and my intended outcome,
Yes.
um, and it was just a lot of fun. It's always been.
Yeah, I mean, I totally can relate to that because I was in fashion for 23 years. So I went to Syracuse and originally majored in surface pattern design and then hated that. So after a year and a half left there, and then I'm like, well, what else can I make money from? Because in my family, it was always about making money and being successful. So I went to Parsons School of Design and did fashion design. But then like after a whole career and being doing the same thing for 23 years, I realized they let me go last March during the pandemic, March of 2020, and I was like, this is I'm not happy. Like I can't keep feeding into corporate world, and it's always about how much we can sell, and like whatever I'm doing is never enough, and the clients and the salespeople. So it was that part where it's like, oh, it's just you're not feeding your soul, you're not feeding your
Yeah.
passions. You don't get to do what you want to do. It's always about them. So that's where finally I'm getting to my own part of like following what I want to do, which is just art. And I was doing a lot of like art shows, and I was having so much fun in that and like helping other people show their stuff. But then the pandemic hit, and then my partner was like, well, maybe you should just do some podcasts since you can't really do an art show, you can't do anything big. I was like, maybe, like, and then like hear everybody's stories. So that's where I fell in love with hearing people's like stories, tips and tricks of how they got to where they are, and then we can help somebody else who's younger. And that's where I'm at now. So that's why I appreciate you coming here and like being part of this, and being able to tell your story and then giving out tips and tricks of how someone else can follow their passions and start a business.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it's my pleasure to do so.
Yeah. And what struggles did you have while you were, doing your business before and then moving on to the gallery?
Well, I think all the typical struggles, right? There's not a whole bunch that's new in life. And, when you have ambitions, you want to grow things, there are a number of typical struggles. So everything from, family work balance to, not having capital to trying to figure out what you're actually offering and who you're actually offering it to.
Yeah.
My entrepreneurial life started very early on. Apologize for the background noise. I'm in
Yeah.
downtown Tampa,
It
so
sounds like New York.
yeah, exactly. ambulances and homeless
Yeah.
people,
Yeah.
everything
That's fine. Yeah.
outside.
Yeah.
so very early on, I started my entrepreneurial career. I got married very early on, almost
Mhm.
right out of high school, and had a baby pretty quick, and so I had to figure life out very quickly.
Mhm.
Had to grow from a $600 Fiero that my dad gave me. Pretty much that's what I had life to start with, and
Mhm.
left home for a year and came back married, and it was
And shock the family.
yeah, yeah. Well, I think everybody was very supportive, which was
Mhm.
great. I had a great childhood. My parents were fantastic, and so I had a lot of support. The figuring out how to do business, how
Hmm.
to get my ideas out was probably one of the biggest challenges. But early on, I embraced it by talking with people that were already successful in business and
Hmm.
trying to surround myself with people who were smart and that I could learn from, that I could not have to recreate their mistakes and their learning curve. And little by little, I was able to, put ideas on paper, and I learned how to build teams, and I learned how to build business plans, and tried a few things, and even went as far as raising 10 million for a venture.
Wow,
And
really? That's amazing.
Yeah, I mean, it was. I mean, you're talking, early on. You're talking 98.
Yeah,
And in my life, I'm 20 years old, ready to start a $10 million or a company with 10 million bucks,
yeah.
and things in life, veered some of that, and that deal kind of fell through because of things that were going on at that time. But as life continued, I just kind of kept at it. I ended up getting remarried after that. Very young marriage didn't work out,
Hmm.
and and then again had kind of supportive family to start a business. When I left my job in 2001, I was about to have my daughter, and I left literally a few months before she was born. So I negotiated health insurance till she was born with my ex-employer in
Wow.
exchange for some contract stuff that I would do for them.
Yeah,
At the same time that I'm starting my business,
yeah.
9/11 happens that year.
Wow.
Everybody pulls development budgets at the end of the year, and by December of that year, I'm flat broke.
Wow.
So
That's
at that
crazy.
point, having to make decisions that were really the fork in the road decisions. Some of them
Hmm.
seemed wild to everyone around me, and having people around me ask me when I was going to get a job. And
Hmm.
I'm doing acquisitions on paper, they're $1 million with no money, and trying to kind of just position myself and work it out. And in 2004, I started the year in foreclosure on my house. So we're in January
Wow.
2004.
Yeah.
I have 4 kids, right? Two that I'm raising from a marriage that was new, and two that I made myself. And
They made you so.
and then and in 2004, we're losing everything.
Wow.
And just tenacity and luck and everything comes together. I get a huge offer to sell one of the businesses I was building. It ends up funding this kind of secret project I was working on that became the main business that then skyrocketed. So January 2004, I was losing my house. By March 2004, I'm renegotiated back out of foreclosure. And by the end of the year, I'm making more money than I had ever made in my life.
Wow.
Business is growing at a trajectory that I had never anticipated.
Hmm.
And by 2008, I'm buying, a $500,000 house across town. I'm making, $250,000 a year. The business is, exceeding $1 million, moving to the $2 million mark. I mean, it was very fast from that point,
Wow. That's
but
a huge, crazy like ups and downs right there.
yeah, it just, it just takes kind of breaking through and trying the different things. And, you start in one place, but you never end up at the place you start.
Hmm.
And so in the middle of all that, again, you have family, you have kids, the kids are coming home to me because I'm working at home for the first few years. And
Yeah.
I get my first office, the big victory. I get an office at the building I had always said I would have an office in, and it was
Wow.
halfway between the school and my house. So the kids would walk to my office. And
Yeah.
so it's living that integrated life and trying to
Yes.
figure out how you pull the pieces together and
Hmm.
make everybody around you's dream come
Happy. Yeah.
true,
Hmm.
but doing, making sure yours is coming true at the same time. And that's kind
That's
of where that
phenomenal.
went. And
Hmm.
and during that time, during the photography time, in the second office we ended up getting, it's this big 3,000 square foot office. It was all creatives. It was big bullpit floor, with a bunch of designers and stuff. And then I had a photo studio, and I opened up a music studio, and we just started doing creative things. And it was during that time that I really was having this wonderful time of just all cylinders firing.
Wow.
And it wasn't until later, though, that I would really discover, again, the world of more of art that was for me. At that
Hmm.
time, building a project-based business, and I'm doing project-based client photography work. everything is for everyone else. Even in
Yeah.
my life, I was buying a house for the kids, and I'm
Hmm.
buying cars for my family, and I'm doing all this stuff, and I'm feeling good about myself, but not quite getting to the things that make me the most happy
Hmm.
in terms of expression. And
Yeah.
so it wasn't until, we're talking, 2014 that I
Mm.
finally stumble on this world of of fine art photography,
Mhm.
and then it was then it was just a roller coaster exploration from there.
Yeah, yeah. No, that's phenomenal. I mean, that story is inspirational in itself. And this is the essence of these podcasts is give those tips and tricks to like, wow, you went from like foreclosure of your house to, then like moving up and you have to get through all of these struggles and trials and tribulations and to tell people to not give up.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So are you closer with your family, like your mom and dad? Like were they always supportive of everything you've done?
Yeah, my parents have always been pretty amazing. They were always the kind of parents that you never believed there was anything you couldn't do. They were the kind of parents that were the kind of the point and shoot. If that's what you want, go for it.
Yeah.
They were very entrepreneurial themselves.
Hmm.
So I learned early on. I remember probably my favorite memory was my parents at some point got involved in Amway. And although I hate Amway, but they got really involved. I was living in New York. We went to Pennsylvania for this big retreat,
Yeah.
and while we were there, we went and we visited this really famous Amway guy's house. His name is Fred Hartize, and Fred has this huge mansion. Just everything was just really big, literally like ancient coins embedded into the concrete of his pull yard. I mean,
Wow.
that kind of wealth we're talking
Yeah,
about.
yeah, yeah. Let's just
And I
bring it
rem-
into the concrete.
yeah, and I remember walking through his house, and I remember my dad just being like amazed, just like this is what I want, this is what I want to achieve, and you feel like this excitement, you feel this motivation, you feel an admiration for him, but I also felt this crazy sadness because Fred wasn't the nicest guy. And
Hmm.
I thought my dad is such a nice guy,
Hmm.
and I just thought the disparity between who deserved this
Hmm.
in my mind,
Yeah.
as a, I don't know, maybe 9, 10 year old. I just thought, my dad works really, he deserves this.
Yeah.
This guy is, I don't really like this guy.
That's
So,
profound for that age for you to think that.
yeah, I just didn't like this guy. He was very just full of himself and condescending. And I just thought, this isn't the right person to have all of this. So I decided really early on in my life, I said, I want to be successful, but I want to do it in a way that I don't have to be a douchebag to do it. I
Mm-hmm.
don't want to compromise being a good person to do this. And later in life, I then also decided like I really didn't need all of that. I just need to live a life that's happy, live a life that's provided for, make
Yeah.
sure my kids are provided for and
Yeah.
okay. And again, not lose your soul in the process.
Yeah, yeah, and that's hard because people always like worry about doing something that you'll lose your soul or you're giving up part of yourself, like, and that's kind of what I felt like when I was doing in corporate world where I was losing my, ability to be able to express myself. So I would always work my 9 to 5, pay my bills, but then only do my passions, like when the kids go to sleep or, in the weekends or, I would always think about myself later. And so, yeah, like now I'm getting to the point where now that I'm trying to, it's that crossroads. So now I'm at that crossroad where do I continue to follow my passions of art and then do these podcasts and try to build up my YouTube page and hopefully monetize it if I get to, good numbers. But I love these because it's a connection to people and it's a connection to all of us that we're all very similar in all the struggles that we go through.
Yeah, we really are. I mean, I've had the privilege of meeting people in very high positions. People are very successful and they have millionaire friends and billionaire friends.
Hmm.
And I can tell you that at the end of the day, everybody's very much the same.
Hmm.
The resources are different, and a lot of times those resources are different at the very highest levels because of a whole lot of luck. I mean, there's a lot of
Hmm.
work that goes into
Hmm.
it,
Hmm.
but there's a lot of people who work really hard and don't become billionaires. It
Yeah.
doesn't guarantee that.
Yeah.
There's a lot of luck. There's a lot of networking. There's a lot of who you meet and
Mm-hmm.
what you do and what the game is, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Also, what products and services you're in. If you're
Yeah.
selling real estate,
Mm-hmm.
then you're selling a higher markup product than if you're selling vacuum cleaners. So
Yeah.
you can sell the same amount of real estate as you sell in vacuum cleaners. You can
Mm-hmm.
kill it in vacuum cleaners, but if you kill it in real estate, you're
You're
going
gonna
to be
make
a
a lot more money in
multimillionaire.
real estate. Yeah.
Yeah, it's just the markup's higher. So there's a lot to becoming wealthy. And I think a lot of times people in the process of becoming successful at whatever level they are. So you could be a hotshot artist, start as starving as you might be.
Mm-hmm.
But what ends up happening is when we start seeing a pattern of success, we become very haughty. We become very arrogant. We start
Mm-hmm.
to think we got this thing figured out,
Yeah.
not realizing that a lot of what we've done really relied on the kindness of others, the
Yep.
opportunities that
Yep.
presented themselves randomly to us that we
Mm-hmm.
weren't able to see. I mean, there's credit given to us,
Mm-hmm.
but at the same time, there's more factors to success than we sometimes realize, and we can tend to take all the credit for ourselves. So we really can become jerks in the process. And I think that the
Yeah. Yeah.
challenge for us is always like fighting that, how do we be confident? How do we know truly what our strengths are and how do we live in that, but without feeling like we're unstoppable, super unstoppable, and like we're not vulnerable to what everybody else is.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. That's the worst thing about it is like when people who you meet who are super cocky and are are just like really like just mean and like asshole people where you're like, listen, you don't need to be like that just because you have this or you have the money. We're all human and you never know who you're gonna meet and you never know who can help you later on. And what if you lose your millions of dollars and billions of dollars and now you just walked all over someone who was homeless and eventually they figured it out and are better than you now, so you never know who you're going to meet in your past. So I always totally agree, like you should be kind to everybody because you never know what kind of day they're having. You never know what kind of life experiences they've had.
It's rare the person who can hang on to everything that they've built, and I think that that's important. I think when you get to a place, even when you get to a place where you have millions or billions of dollars, you can still lose that stuff. It's a little harder though if you're smart to lose that entirely, but you can lose your family, you can lose your health, you can lose so many things along the way that then makes all that kind of irrelevant.
Mm-hmm.
But most people who are successful or mildly successful or just successful, whatever they target,
Mm-hmm.
I think there's a key to something, and it's to remember that your success is temporary because everything is a cycle. So
Yeah.
you're going to have these high moments. There's a great book, The Book of Five Rings. It's an old book and talks about this idea
Mm-hmm.
of the cycle of life and how when things are on the upswing, run fast because there's a time you're going to have to kind of relax as things swing down so
Yeah.
that you
Yeah.
don't stress yourself out and kill yourself, because don't worry, because things will swing back up. So anybody who's successful, anybody who you can make $1 million today and tomorrow lose 2 million and be a
Yeah.
million a day.
Mm-hmm.
Then you can recover it just as quickly and then lose it again just as quickly. And that's the story of a lot of people. And
Yeah.
when we're in the middle of a success, like when we're in the middle of sitting here, I'm in this beautiful gallery that we opened up a year and a half. In 5 years, I may not be here at all. This might be just a fond memory of something that I did. And I may be in something else that's either successful, or I may be sitting there wishing for the better days when I had the gallery. So we don't know where we're going to be. The best thing that we could do is, be grateful and thankful for where we are.
Yeah, and be
And
present.
try to make our best moves.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Like I'm learning to be more present and be grateful and enjoy those connections with people because end of the day, as you get older, you have to nourish those family and friends and connections with everybody that you've gone through, from your kids to your family and all of it.
Absolutely.
Yeah. What are some life lessons you learned from your first marriage?
I got married really young. I've been married twice and divorced twice, and in a wonderful relationship now. But some people say, well, you failed twice. I really think I hit the jackpot twice, and in a lot of different ways. In my first marriage, it was a young marriage. It's two people who were just trying to figure life out. I was very ambitious,
Mm-hmm.
and she wanted to be 19, you know, and so
Yeah, yeah.
she just wanted to enjoy, which looking back, I
Hmm.
would have probably made that choice now that I'm, 40 something ish,
Hmm.
almost 50. And I look back at that time and said, I probably should have been more of a
Hmm.
kid. I could have still done what I was doing and still taken the time to
Yeah,
enjoy my life
yeah,
with my young wife.
yeah,
But ultimately, it failed because there was that tearing of one person saying, "I really just don't need all this. I
yeah,
just want to live in the present, and I'm living way in the future."
yeah.
So a lot of that, two people just not working out.
Hmm.
In my second marriage, that lasted for almost 20 years, and we raised four great kids,
Hmm.
and there were a lot of lessons there. But I think that as I walk out, I think compatibility is so important.
Hmm.
Love is amazing. Love is I define love as the compulsion to give to someone. If I feel the compulsion to give to you, then that's love. I mean, that's it. The
Yeah,
more that I'm
yeah.
willing to do that, the more I love you,
Hmm.
and vice versa.
Hmm.
I found in life that mutuality is important, having
Hmm.
that same level of give and take,
Hmm.
being careful to avoid takers. And then also, again, finding that compatibility. Sometimes two people love each other tons and they're willing to do so much, but the reality is that compatibility doesn't exist. If they want two different things out of life, or they want to go two different directions. I mean, sometimes it's as simple as they want to live two different places.
Yeah, yeah.
And when that happens, there's a lot of other stuff that can go wrong, and you
Hmm.
end up living in that other stuff. But the real
Hmm.
reason is what's in the middle. It's like we
Hmm.
just have these two core things together. So ultimately, I think as we look around for people that we want to be with, I think it's who do we feel that we want to give to,
Hmm.
um, who compels us to that, but also who can we mesh and be real partners with and
Hmm.
move forward together in a direction. And this
Yeah.
goes for, I mean, everything. Sometimes people find one or two things and they're like, oh, this is the one. But there are a lot of details to that. What does
Yes,
your
a lot.
morning look like?
Yeah, a
Just
lot.
ask somebody that. Well, what do you do what's your routine in the morning? And you
Hmm.
disqualify a lot of people just in that.
Yeah.
And there's some people though that it's so great their answer to that question that you don't care that you don't have the same favorite color. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, yeah.
There's a lot of things that are important, and I find that two different careers, not a problem.
Hmm.
That I want this kind of car, you want that kind of car. That's not the compatibility I'm talking about. What I'm talking about is like two puzzle pieces, right?
Yeah.
So our routines and the things we want to do, how do we want to spend our weekends? How do we want to spend our weeks? Are we both hard workers? Do we have
Hmm.
the same work ethic? There's a lot of things, do we both feel responsible for things? There's a lot of relationships where one person is so responsible for everything and the other person just feels like the other person should be responsible for that
Yeah,
instead
yeah,
of both taking responsibility for everything.
yeah.
And so those are the types of things. And there's some relationships where that's not what people want. They want to play roles, and that's okay. I want this role. I want my other person to have that role. If you
Hmm.
find someone who's compatible with that model,
Yeah.
then take it and know that there's so many relationship models.
Hmm.
Which is another point that I kind of walked out with was,
Hmm.
there's a lot of ways to do this.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, no, that's beautiful. Like I had I'm going through that journey where, my mother had passed away in 2013, and then I was going through a divorce at the same time. So I'm going through all of those like life lessons of compatibility and learning what keeps a relationship together, what's a healthy relationship, because I never really had those boundaries as a child. Like my parents were super dysfunctional, violent. My father was like manic depressive, all of these crazy things, abusive. And so I didn't learn those things from my father. So as I grow older, like I feel like I'm relearning all of these things, like all those things that you're saying. I'm relearning all of those things at like around age 40 is when I felt like I kind of like woke up from my slumber, and I'm in this new world where like wow, like sometimes I realize like love is not enough. Like you
Yeah.
have to have those other things, like you say, like it has to be compatible, it has to be a puzzle piece, and same core values, and the same thing you say, like living in the same place. Maybe one person wants to move here, one person wants to stay here. Like those are things that will affect relationships, and love might not be able to keep you together.
Well, you just look at friendships or you look at other family members, right? Because in marriage, and even in really serious dating relationships and partnerships, what we do is we say to each other, I'm going to be here no matter what, right? And what ends up happening is that both cements you so that you do tough it through times where you really be thankful that you did tough it through.
Mm-hmm.
But it also traps you in potentially in situations that you weren't really anticipating.
Mm-hmm.
And in any other relationship, we would simply let the other person go home. So
yeah.
I have, for example, one of my kids, we were having some issues with him as he was graduating high school. And, I looked at him one day and I said, you have 30 days after you graduate to find out where you're going to live.
Yeah.
Now, I didn't stop loving my kid.
Yeah.
But I had to draw a boundary and I had to say, I can't partner with you in life.
Mm-hmm.
I can't do every day with you.
Mm-hmm.
I'll see you when you need me, and we'll see each other when we want to spend time together. But I can't be a partner with you because we've got two different ways of living this that are so different that they cause issues. So, someone can look and say, did you? How could you do it as a father? And it was very simple to do. I was very, very stern with it. And he looks back and tells me it was the greatest thing that I did. It catapulted him into his direction in life, and he's doing fantastic.
Was
And
he struggling when you first told him?
What's that?
Was he struggling when you first told him, here's your 30 days?
Oh, yeah. He
okay.
looked at me and said, are you kicking me out? I said, no, you just have to move in 30 days. That's what I told him. Here's your luggage. But for me, and somebody asked me, did you feel bad? I said, no, not in the least. I knew that there were so many other places he could be that were going to be better for him than here struggling with me and me struggling with him. And it was just, again, it was going to build things around the relationship that don't need to be there. So I'd rather just have this problem with you than in 30 days now be at each other's throat. And I am truly physically kicking you out of my house. So then now you have so much to repair. Well, you can't really do that in a marriage, can you? You can't really say, listen, you got 30 days.
Yeah, 30 days.
To move out, rethink your life. You can't do that.
Yeah.
But for relatives, a lot of times, one of the lessons I've learned in life too is that, you don't have to stick around relationships. You can fire relationships, even if they're family. So if you've got a family member that's hurting you, you have the right to say, I'm disconnecting.
Yeah.
And you know what? No, I actually don't actually love you very much. I don't want to give to you. I don't feel and I don't feel like you have that towards me. We shouldn't be together ever. And it's okay to do that. And the more that you've been hurt, the more it's important for you to separate yourself from that relationship for your own health, for your own pace. You don't
your own mental stability, your mental health. Yeah.
Yeah, you don't have to be at dinner every Christmas with your abuser. You can say, I'm not going to be there if that person's there because I'm more peaceful and better off without them.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
But you can't do that in marriage unless you get divorced. So compatibility is so important.
Yeah, it's really hard because I grew up with I basically felt like I was in a prison or a mafia where you never spoke about the problems that were at home. Super traditional, and did was wrong. So growing up, my confidence level was super low, even though my exterior was super positive. I was did all the activities in school, so nobody would ever notice the problems I would have because I hid it so well. And at 40 is when I started unpacking all of it and realizing that, and and then the divorce of having to speak up for myself and saying, you know what, I'm not happy, and here's the things why I'm not happy. And if I keep telling you the things that I'm not happy about, and we're not working on them together, and you're not supporting my passions, then this is not going to work as a partnership. I'm not feeling like you're hearing me and supporting me in any way. So that's one of the hardest things, is to finally put that boundary down, even though you do love someone. I love you, but this is not working.
especially if you're giving to the other person's side. So if you're putting in, right, if you're supporting someone, especially if you're in there. I mean, I'm a kind of person that if I'm in a relationship, I'm like, listen, if you don't like my plan, what's your plan? If you have a plan, let's then go after yours. I mean,
Yeah. Yeah.
let's do that. But at some point, I'm going to need your help of mine. And if I've done all my work towards yours and now it's my turn and
Hmm.
you back off, then I know this isn't a reciprocal relationship.
Yeah.
I know that the agreement that we built, and this is a really key part is that you can build agreements in your relationship unconsciously that end up sabotaging you later. So in a
Yes.
relationship that
Yes.
you are overly giving and the person is more than happy to receive, but
You
isn't
take it
return
all.
giving, right? You're feeling good because they're receiving what you're giving,
Mhm.
but that becomes their role. Later, you can't be mad when that
Yeah.
person doesn't give to you because
Yes.
your relationship wasn't based on that,
Hmm.
right? It only exists because you're giving.
Yeah.
So you can't expect it to flip around.
Yeah.
And that's a mistake a lot of people make. And unfortunately, we take decades to figure it out and then we
Yeah.
have to back
Yeah,
out.
totally. Because like even though everything happened, I'll take complete ownership of my part in this because I'm not as outspoken as I am now in my relationship. So basically, I created the monster because
Yeah.
like if I allowed you to do all of these things, and then later on I'm saying like, no, I don't, no, 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 and then it's just like, what? But you were fine with it all of those years and 10 years that we were together, like and then they don't realize, well, now you're changing and they don't like the changes that
Yeah.
you are now and they're just not used to it. They're like,
And
so
knowing when you're guilty of the same too. There are times in my life where I've had to stop and go, hang on for a second. I'm not giving back to someone who I should be appreciative for. And it's not about being held hostage to this giving back thing, but they're contributing more. They're putting more on the table here, and I'm not really coming with anything. So maybe I should think of stuff to come back with. Maybe I should stop talking about my thing and ask them for once, well, what do
mhm.
you want to do?
Yeah,
What's your plan? Why are you even helping me? Why are you in this?
yeah,
And that really reveals a lot and allows you to say, okay, let me spend some time contributing back because people got to be fed in order to keep healthy. And if they're
hmm,
just giving, 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 at some point they run out if you're not giving back.
hmm,
So
hmm,
it's important that we're evaluating our relationships, not just the other person, but ourselves. But the other person is important. The
yeah,
other person
yeah,
is. And that's kind of what led to the discovery of art for me was, at some point I realized, man, I've just been doing so much for everyone else in
hmm,
my life. At least that's the way I felt. I felt like, man, I've just been living my life for everyone else. And now, it's time for me to do that and discover that. And I come from a pretty conservative background. So
hmm,
I hadn't really been involved in a lot of the more fine art, the more, I'll just say risque art. And although I'd been photographing mostly fashion, but really, again, from a conservative perspective. So
hmm,
my
hmm,
exploration led me into things like nude photography and
hmm,
erotic photography, which I fell in love with. And that
hmm.
became that plus kind of an anti-lighting style that I wanted to apply as opposed to
Yeah,
the fashion lighting. I want to do
yeah,
anti-light.
yeah.
And and it just kind of created this style and experience of creative process for me, which I really enjoy.
So did you struggle to move to that more style? Because if you were so conservative with what you were doing before, was it hard for you to like reveal this new style of yours?
Yes and no. So yes, for the sake of the people around me who, when you live a conservative life, you're surrounded by conservative people, right?
Mhm.
And this what kind of keeps you in that. And I was the one constantly kind of pushing the walls of that.
Mhm.
Um, and so I was in a part of my life where I was kind of done with it. I was done with
Mhm.
this closed in ideal, and I wanted to see what was beyond the walls, and
Mhm.
it allowed me to explore that creatively. But then when I actually started releasing this stuff, that's really where a lot of my breakthroughs had to happen. Emotionally and mentally, I was already there.
Mhm.
But I had to figure out how do I transition from what people know me as
Mhm.
to now something that's a little bit different, that's going to be unexpected.
Yeah.
And what I discovered was really the best way to do it is to completely blow it up.
Oh,
Um,
okay. Not slowly,
yeah,
just blow it up.
you know what? If people are already disappointed in you, there's nowhere to go but better.
Yeah. Yeah.
So the best thing to do is disappoint all the conservative people
Blow it
around you.
all up. Yeah.
Jay's gone nuts. He's just full hedonist. He's just the whole
Mm.
thing.
Mm-hmm.
Great. Now everything I do that you're going to see is going to be more conservative than you expect.
Uh, I love that. That's hysterical because looking at you, you don't look conservative to me now, right? Like, so this is not how you looked before.
No, I wore polo shirts every day. I had my
Oh my,
hair cut short. I mean, shaved
yeah,
my face.
yeah.
I was a dad. I was a dad. I was very involved in church. I was, a lot of things, and
Wow.
it's all good people that it works for. But at some point for me, it just didn't work. It didn't work for me. It didn't work for the people around me either, even though they stayed in it. But for me, I just thought there's a lot more to this.
Mm-hmm.
And so I just started to explore those things, explore myself in the process, and
Mm-hmm.
kind of try to redefine myself. And yeah, one of the first things that I was able to do was just come out with it and just say,
Mm.
this is what I got, this is what I'm doing. And people just nodded and went, there were some people who were like, okay.
Like
And
you
then there
lost your
were
mind.
okay, where are you going with this?
Mm-hmm.
But honestly, there were a lot of people, even conservative people around me, loved it.
Mm.
And what you find is that, people are, they're a lot more interested in breaking out of their shell
Mm-hmm.
than they might seem.
Yeah, yeah.
And for some, behind the facade, they're
Mm-hmm.
actually very not conservative.
Yeah.
Um, they just know that publicly they have developed this persona
Mask.
and got
Yeah.
to maintain that persona. So
Mm-hmm.
you see that a lot with, for example, here in Florida, we've got a huge lifestyle scene, and the lifestyle scene is mostly conservative people.
Yeah, yeah. Conservative
Ooh.
rich people.
Conservative rich people. I mean,
Yeah,
honestly, it's conservative people in a pickup truck too. I mean, it's just conservative people all around
yeah,
that will literally go to crazy wild parties on Saturday and go to
yeah,
church on Sunday morning,
yeah.
because they're
Oh,
going with people that are that, and
yeah.
then they go to church with the people that are that.
Mm-hmm.
So they have these two pieces of their life, and I just knew for me that wasn't going to happen. That wasn't going to work. I needed to live a little more congruently because I always
Yeah,
had.
yeah.
So I said, well, if I was always this way, then now that I'm moving this way, I'm going to define something that I can always be. I don't
Mm-hmm.
want a public and private face. I want
Yeah,
one person
yeah. Be
with all
authentic.
this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I can get down and be, and be conservative and polite and professional and all those things. But I can also be crazy and wild and have an amazing, weekend. So
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Oh my God, that's so funny. So you're gonna have to like send me, I don't know if you sent me, but you're gonna have to send me one of these conservative polo photos of yours.
yeah, I'll have to. This
Because
is
I
me before. This is me
yeah,
now.
because I love to show, a range of photos of people when I do these edits of these podcasts because it's fun to see, even from like when you were a baby to teenage and then you like, the years, like through the years and then, your polo days and your conservative days and then to who you are now authentically and comfortable with yourself to express yourself. So it's always fun to see that, transition and evolution of people that I meet.
And this is what creates art. Honestly, I'm convinced that it's the process. It's not so much the conservative to the whatever liberal, whatever you want to call it.
Mhm.
It's more of the walled position. And
Mhm.
that sometimes I've seen liberals in a walled position too. They're so walled in by their own
Mhm.
definitions that they can't consider that there's a spectrum, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And I think that everything, most of life is is in a series of spectrums.
Mhm.
There's no real these absolute definitions are
Yeah.
strange, and they become stranger as I've learned more.
Mhm.
But one of the things about art that allows us to do is allows us to kind of push on those definitions and say, well, what if?
Yeah.
What if things won't break down
Mhm.
if I defy this principle? And what if, I mean, sure, you can say this is the same question Eve asked herself. Well, what if I eat of that apple and I don't die?
Mhm.
What happens then?
Yeah.
It's
What if
kind of
everything
that.
works out, right?
And
Yeah.
what if it works out? I saw this wonderful technique to overcome anxiety, and it's every time you feel anxious, count backwards, 5 to 0. When you get to 0, create a what if that's opposite of the thing you're fearing, the thing that's causing anxiety. So let's say you're thinking, if I make this decision, what if it goes wrong? You're feeling anxiety. Count back from 5 to 1, and then at the end of it, say, what
That's
if
a
it goes
motivational
wrong?
speaker, right? It's a woman.
Yes, yeah. I saw
Blonde hair and black glasses. I
Yes.
can't remember her name, but I know who you're talking about.
It's a phenomenal technique, and it does start to rewire you.
Yeah.
And just take and say, well, what if it's going to work out? What if this goes right?
I see her face. I'm trying to remember her name, but
yeah, I can't remember her name right now.
Yeah.
But what a great technique. And I think that art says that. What if we put that on canvas? What if we take that picture? What if, and in my creative process, mine is a very organic process. I take people through contrived situations and experiences, and then I photograph their honest responses and their experience going through it. And that's usually what I ask myself, well, what if I take this person who was just married for 25 years, just found out, just got a divorce 6 weeks ago, and she's trying to rediscover herself. What if I photograph her naked on a black backdrop and let her express herself? And who do we find? Who do we see? Who does she discover? And what you get is this shoot where someone's crying for 80% of it, but she's finding out who she is. She's remembering things about herself that she had forgotten, because this is the time to do it. There's no other time. What if I take 2 muscle-bound people, tie them up with yarn back to back, and tell them to kind of figure out how to turn around inside the yarn? And I'm shooting this, and I'm thinking how ridiculous this whole scenario is. But I'm thinking, this is art. We're asking the what if questions, and they walk out with, I don't know what I just did, but it was amazing. It was an amazing experience.
So this is what you're doing to people?
Yeah, this is what I photograph. What if I find 3 ridiculously great looking people, and I just put them in a backdrop together and say, figure it out, find each other, get to know each other now without any clothes on, and let's see what we get. And what you get is this beautiful series of images that 3 people expressed. I had a four image series that came out of it, and it was about love. It's called All Is Full of Love. And you could not know that these people did not know each other before.
Really? Wow.
It was the first 3 hours they had ever known each other.
Wow.
But it's amazing what happens when you ask yourself, what if it goes right?
What if you just jump in? Yeah.
What if my relationship model can be different? What if I can be more open in my relationship with letting my person explore the things that makes them happy, instead of being afraid that if they do what's going to make them happy, it could take them away from you.
Yeah, like what if they let them do this and then they leave me?
Right. What if they pursue this career and then I disappear in the background? Or what if, and there's a lot of what ifs in relationships, right? If we just flip them around and say, well, what if the answer is always yes? And that's one of my new mantras too, is it's never no. The answer is never no in my relationship. It's yes and how. Now the how might be complicated. It might be full of caveats, but the answer is not no. The answer is yes if we can meet this criteria, if we can get in this situation.
If you can figure out the how,
Let's just figure out the how, so we don't focus so much on arguing as to whether yes or no.
I love that. Now, when you were changing and transitioning to more authentically yourself, were you married in this 3rd marriage already? Or you were?
Well, I was in the middle of my 2nd marriage, and it was definitely a decision that changed me in many ways. And so in response to my changes, you have another person who has to now make adjustments as well, but they're in the middle of their own changes too, So it's one of those things where, without revealing too much about, what's private, it gets to a place where you get to an impasse, and 2 people trying hard to figure it out, reconcile it, 2 people saying, I kind of wanted to go this way, but now you're wanting to go this way. And I'm going, well, but I wanted to go this way kind of all along. It's just I've been going this way because you were going that way. And is there a new way? Is there how?
Is there how to get to a new place together?
Yeah. And so you have to make determinations about that. And I think that it's okay that when you figure out that there's no real solution for that, that you both give each other the ability to say, go your way. And the reality is with relationships, they don't have to be over simply because they're over. They can always come back around. But in the case of my relationship, I do definitely believe there was a definitive
Yeah.
two directions, and it was a great decision to make for both of us. We, like I said, we had done a great job raising four great kids, built a good life, experienced a lot of things together. And it was just time to finally be honest with ourselves and move in the
Yeah.
directions that
Yeah.
we wanted to.
Yeah. Well, I loved how you explained your first two marriages, that they were huge life lessons for you and gifts for you to learn more about. They learn more about themselves, you learn more about yourselves, and they were great lessons in life to get
Yeah,
to where you are
yeah,
now.
and you gain those lessons, right? But you never become the expert, because when you're in a relationship with new people, you have to learn the nuances of that.
Yeah.
And people are so vast, right? They're universes all inside of themselves, that when you meet them, it's like you just went to a whole nother time space, and you have to figure those, and you bring some of your lessons with you. You hopefully are a better person for what you've learned. You hopefully can let go of the anger, any bitterness, any resentment that the other relationships may have built in you, and and you're trying to get rid of your triggers, and they're trying to get rid of theirs, because most likely they've
Yeah,
been in
yeah,
another
those are
relationship.
huge things, triggers. Like I'm just setting off tons of triggers here,
Yeah.
there, everywhere.
Yeah, exactly. And they're going through their own transition. You're going through
Yeah.
your transition into this relationship. And so, I'm happy to say, obviously, I'm in a wonderful relationship. And Annie, who's the other partner here in the gallery, she's our gallery director. And she's an amazing artist herself. We like to say we're flip coins of the same quarter, flip sides of the same quarter. She also photographs expressive nudes, where mine are stories of others. Annie's are typically stories that are her stories, and she does what we call self-portraiture by proxy, which is she casts somebody as her in the
Oh, I
story.
love that. I love that.
And then, yeah, somebody who usually like looks like her. It's usually somebody with dark hair, somebody who's
Oh,
kind of Hispanic
interesting. That's
looking.
very cool. That's very cool.
Yeah, and then she kind of depicts the stories or the
Yeah, yeah.
feelings of the story.
That's awesome. So you found someone who is very similar to like the things that you want to do and like to do,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, we have a lot of similarities, and then there's her dreams, her hopes, her place in life, her experiences that are different, and we're able to kind of bring those ingredients to the table, and sometimes they're just like perfect ingredients to push something forward, and then sometimes, like any relationship, you have to figure out how to negotiate it. I think that a lot of times people end up compromising, which is basically two people losing something for the sake of something.
Yeah.
Negotiation is a lot more of our mode. Our mode is
Yeah.
more like,
Okay.
no, I don't want to lose, and you
Yeah.
don't want to lose. So how do we
Yeah.
negotiate the win?
Yeah, I like that because there was some I'm trying to remember somebody there was a famous person can't remember her name right now, but she was saying in a quote of her interview, she's like, compromise? Why would I compromise? Like, why would I compromise my things? Like, no. So I like that you say like not compromising, but negotiation of it,
Yeah.
so everybody wins and you get what you need, I get what I need. And it's a better way than compromising and losing part of yourself, because you lose parts of yourself when you feel like you're just giving too much or they're giving too much, and then there's no balance there.
And people will say, well, but what if, insert ridiculously audacious thing that your person wants here? What if that's what they want? And I say, well, then we negotiate. The person gets it. The answer is yes. How?
Yeah.
And I think that if we release like ourselves from that fear, right?
Yeah.
Because the reality is that everybody here is an adult. We can
Yeah.
make our decisions. We don't need the other one's permission. Sometimes we need each other's consent, but permission is not a word we should be using in a relationship. I consent to my time being used in this way, or I consent to the thing that I'm holding, maybe letting that go for a little while. For the sake of my person, I'm consenting to this, but the permission for that person, it's kind of artificial. It's very
Yeah.
controlled. So the idea of living in a relationship where you can, be asked to consent, and a relationship where the answer is always yes, and whatever how audacious the request is, it can still be presented without judgment, and just figuring out how to live life the best, knowing that most questions aren't that big. Most questions are just like, I just don't want to eat there today.
Yeah.
I'd rather eat here. Okay, how do we get that for you and still get me the pizza that I want?
Yeah.
Like, so, like that's really the day-to-day life. So sometimes the fears that people have are unreasonable. They're not realistic.
Yeah. Well, this was a pleasure to have this conversation with you. I loved it, and I really, really enjoyed it. And the fun thing is that it's not just like a one-sided, like just like, oh, straightforward questions of, you know, who you are, whatever. I love that it went to a more expansive place of spirituality and life and love and business and evolving of being our authentic self. So this was a pleasure. So thank you so much for joining me today.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. We'll talk soon. Bye.